Hello again. Okay, so this morning I got out here and when I stopped, I had all the polyester stuff done. It was all gray. And now I've got the urethane on. I just sprayed it, which as I was cleaning up my guns and mixing, I'm like, yeah, I better throw some of that in there too. But just a quick showing of now how everything has a little bit of sheen to it. And it is all really, really smooth. Everything looks good. And just like every other case, there's a little bitty low spot right there. And you'll ask yourself how you miss stuff like that. Well, hell, who knows? So I just put it's so minor, I just put a couple of more coats of the urethane primer on there. And I figured I would show you this. So the primer that I was using was this Shopline. And the hardener for it is that one. And I normally use Omni, but I couldn't get it. Couldn't find it anywhere. So the Shopline's, I mean, I love the way it sprayed. It seems good. So we'll go with that. Now, when I mix this up, you'll have to go to the tech sheets, but I never seen anything really explain this. But then again, I haven't looked. So this stuff mixes 4-to-1. So you want to find cups that have 4-to-1 on it. And you'll see this one is 4-to-1. So when you decide how much you want, say you want half of this cup, and if you'll just rotate it around, it'll tell you about how many ounces that is. So right there, 14, 16 ounces. Say 16, that's a little more than halfway up. That is a quart. So you can tell, oh, I'm sorry, it's half a quart. So you can tell, then you get good at estimating how much you're going to need. And if you mix this stuff, so the primer, say you want about 8 ounces here. You'll fill that up to 7, and that's not 7 ounces. That's just, it's a number reference. So you put your primer in till it hits the 7. That's 4 parts. And then you put the hardener in just to go to the next 7. And that's 1 part. And then if you want to reduce it a little, 4-to-1 would be to the next one. But a lot of these primers either don't take any, or they'll go 4-to-1 to 15%. And if you shop around, you'll find different cups with different measurements. Like there's one that's already set up 4-to-1 to 15%. So you mix it 5 parts primer, 1 part hardener, and then 15% of all of this now makes sense because from here to here, that's 15% of that. So that'll get you, it'll get you dialed in. Most of the clears and things I use are 4-to-1. The epoxy is usually a 2-to-1, and I don't know if it's on here, but that's easy math. 2 parts to 1 part. So if you wanted to mix by your ounces here, say 400, right at 14 ounces, 14 of primer and 7 of hardener. Same thing, 400, get over here, 400 milliliters. If that's what you're working with, then you only need 2-to-1. So 2 parts is 4, half of that, 6. So that gets you pretty much taking care of most of it. And I don't care how many times you do this, if you stand out here and get high breathing fumes, you'll forget stuff and be like, what the heck? I don't know, maybe it's just me, I'm getting old. But I keep a cheat sheet, and I just write down my most common things, and because sometimes you do, if you're working on a couple other parts, like some days I may have enough parts in here that I'm putting epoxy on in the paint room, and then out here in the main shop I'll put in primers and just start mixing it. So you can forget, it happens. Another thing I do is I buy my wash thinners by the 5 gallons, and I use that to clean everything. And then while I'm thinking of it, the epoxy usually thins with acetone. If you look and dig it up, it'll tell you can do that. And on the primers and things, I use regular reducers. And this is some high dollar stuff here, but I mean, you don't ever use much of it, and so I just don't, it's 15% when you're mixing it in. So that good stuff is what I use when I'm doing my clears, and I like to use 2021 clear. That's that Glamour Coat PPG puts out. Stuff glows, buffs great. So anyway, you can get that. And then you'll find too that you just start accumulating all kinds of different things. I've got, hardeners for base coat if I think it's going to be needed on a spot or something like that. And then gun wise, since we're getting into some spraying now, what I do, I've tried a bunch of different guns. I've tried the Setas, I can't even think of the names off the top of my head because I've used them all. I was working in Ford shop years ago. And so the reps would come around and give you different things to try, blah, blah, blah. And I honestly, I've used Sharp, I've used some high-end stuff, $600, $700 guns. And when you're doing, I guess maybe in the shop work where you want to put it on, make it lay like glass, and then move on to the next one, no buffing, they're good for that. But I don't do that, and I haven't done that in years. I've always buffed everything. So if that's the case, and I'm kind of working in my own shop where I'll be welding 1 minute, and then I try to keep my paint booth pretty clean, but you get crap in it, I buff them anyway. To me, they look better, and that's just the kind of cars I do. But let me just show you here. This is a Finish Line gun. It's the Velvis. I put a 2.0 or 2.2 tip in it. This is what I use. I don't know if you can see it here. I mean, it moves a lot of material, and that's what you got to have to spray the polyesters. That's the only thing I use it for, 2.0, 2.2, and that stuff's thick. Like I say, it's sprayable Bondo. Then for my primers, again, I use a DeVelvis Finish Line. I think this is a 1.8 tip, might be 1.4. Anyway, you play with them, and it's all what, if you use a bigger tip, you move faster. If you use a smaller tip, you move slower. You learn to work with those things. Then for my base coats, I use a DeVelvis, it's a GTI, and I really like that. And then I keep a dedicated GTI. Obviously, you can tell this is definitely a lot cleaner gun. I keep that just for clear. And then I have actually swapped out the caps. I won't get into that, because you've got some high atomization caps, different things like that, different tips. I've played with all of them, and honestly, these guns are $300 or less, somewhere around there. The Finish Line stuff, you can buy a freaking set of 3 for $160, and they work fine. And that's just like the Harbor Freight purple guns. Hey man, I can lay some paint with them. And in some of the best paint jobs I've done, I did one when I was in the Air Force. I did it me and some guys went out to an old pavilion down at Lackland Air Force Base, abandoned pavilion. We wrapped plastic around it, and hell, we spent a weekend painted everybody's cars. Painted I know Datsun 280Z. Did my buddy's Mustang fastback, 70 fastback, and again, once we hand sand them and buff them, they look freaking great. Now, other than the occasional moth or spider that drops down, you know, you got that. I actually had a spider get into a paint job one time, and the guy, it was right on the sail panel, and it laid out perfect. It looked like you airbrushed it in there, and the guy was like, fuck it, keep it. Oops, sorry. I'll probably get beamed on that one. But he's like, keep it. So that was that. But I did a lot of in the desert, in the backyard, whatever we could come up with. And if you had to touch anything up, you touched it up. No big deal. But again, we weren't shooting for, you know, we raced these cars and had fun with them. So we weren't just parking them anywhere. But anyway, that was that. I just wanted to show you that. I'll try to remind myself now that we're getting into the paint stuff to show you some of the mixing things. But that's it. That's the simple thing to do with the cups. And I'm not sure what I'm going to do next. It's such a nice day. We may uncover the truck and take it for a ride. I know Tammy wants to. So anyway, at least the shop's a little cleaner. I had to clean it out, wash it out yesterday, knock the dust down, but everything's looking good. This part just takes so long, but man, I hate doing Bondo, and it's so nasty, dirty, dusty. Wear your mask. And I still got the hood to do, but it's so straight. I'm just going to razor blade the paint off of it and probably just hand sand it. I may not even put any I probably won't put any polyester. It's a good one. I paid well for it, but it's a good one. So anyway, that's that. We'll get back to doing something else later. Thanks.